All right, everybody. Get your butts over here. All right.
All right. That's what we're doing this week.
Whoa. Sit down in unison.
Perfect unison. I've been slowly moving the chairs closer and closer to the stage, mostly for chapel services on Tuesdays, because no one ever sits in the front row at chapel. And so I'm like, okay, if no one's going to sit in the front row, then I will move the second row to where the front row used to be. And then it at least gets everybody a little bit closer. So, how's it going, everybody? Good? Great? Yeah. I just heard from Lizzie that Alina is not feeling very good. So if y'all can pray for her, I'm sure Lizzie would appreciate it. We're recording this, so everybody wave at Lizzie on the camera. I'm gonna. Also, Jordan and Jamie, I'm sure, are watching this later too. So. And anybody else? Anybody else is watching? Hello. Thank you for joining in. So,
I'll give you $5 if that wasn't pointless, by the way.
yeah. If you didn't hear that, Mikey said, "Hi, Isaac." He said he'll give you $5 if that wasn't pointless. So, I think only my mic is picking up. So, the thing I struggled with what to do today is we've been going through the Psalms. We've been talking about how to not lose hope when the people that are supposed to be in charge, the people that are supposed to keep control, are the ones that are actually causing more chaos in our lives than some of our direct enemies might be. And we felt that the Psalms are helpful to kind of help us lean into our emotions during those times. And so it was hard to narrow it down when I was trying to decide exactly what did I want to do for tonight. And ultimately, I just ended up deciding on my favorite psalm and the one that is the most important to me. Many of you have heard me tell the story about how we got Toby's name and how a big portion of my story was learning to really trust that God loved me and really trust and sort of rest in God. One part of that story that I haven't really told was that a good year and a half before I really came to that realization and really had my big moment and really felt God speak to me, I discovered this psalm. And I was going through a really tough period. I was getting ready. It was when I was in my master's degree and I was about to go to work one Monday morning and was basically trying to do everything possible to stave off an anxiety attack. I was in the shower. It was like 5 a.m. Everybody in the house was asleep. And I was just like having a million like horrible thoughts and just not sure what to do. And my go-to whenever I am having anxious thoughts and in a bad mental state is to put on a podcast and distract myself. Adrian used to joke that I never shower without listening to a podcast. Like I'll take my phone and just set it on the little shower thing and have like a podcast playing at all points in time. And I was like, yeah, because if I don't, then I'm just like alone with my crippling anxiety and dark thoughts. And so I was trying to distract myself. And I'd recently discovered a podcast that's called the Renovare Podcast. It is put on by a guy named Nathan Foster, who is the son of another guy named Richard Foster. Richard Foster wrote a book called The Celebration of Discipline, and it has a lot of really interesting things in it about how you can use like meditation and prayer and fasting and various different spiritual disciplines to grow closer to God. Richard Foster, I don't think has passed away, but is like upper 90s. And his son, Nathan Foster, has kind of taken on his ministry and started to kind of help teach people the value of meditating on the Word and doing various different spiritual disciplines. So I put on that podcast in the shower, and it was about Psalm 131. So I'm going to pass this around so you guys can read along with me on Psalm 131. I actually have enough this time. So this is what Psalm 131 says. This is a song of ascents of David. It says, "My heart is not proud, Lord. My eyes are not haughty. I do not concern myself with great matters or things too wonderful for me. But I have calmed and quieted myself. I am like a weaned child with its mother. Like a weaned child, I am content. Israel, put your hope in the Lord, both now and forevermore." And so the podcast focused on this psalm, and it just kind of walks you through it verse by verse, gives you different things to think about and different sort of ways to pray this psalm. And so that's what I did in the shower these several years ago. And it was probably the first time in years that I felt like this spiritual, supernatural peace in that moment. And it was this really powerful moment that kind of just stuck with me ever since then. So what I wanted to do for us today is I actually just want to play that same podcast for you guys. It was 15 minutes. It's super short. But the reason I thought it would be appropriate for what we've been talking about, Jacob just preached last week on, is God unfaithful? And the interesting feelings that we can have as Christians when it feels like God made us these promises and then he has not held up his end of the bargain. And there is all kinds of solutions that you find in the Bible. In a lot of ways, I feel like that is like the ultimate question of the Bible in a lot of ways. Do you trust that God's going to do what he said he's going to do? But I think that this psalm gives us one of the most hard to accept answers, but I think one of the most helpful answers for how to answer questions that we're wondering about. So I'll just leave it at that. I'll play the podcast. You guys are welcome to go find a spot somewhere else to sit in if you don't want to sit in these chairs. At least you're not sitting in the uncomfortable triangle stools over there if you've ever tried to sit in those. They would not be good even for the next 15 minutes. But whatever you need to do to just focus, try not to let your mind wander. Try to really focus on the words of what's being said here. And just try to, like I said, connect with the answers that God can give us in our times of questioning. Let's see if this works.
I would invite you, join me in sinking in to a psalm, the great prayer book of the people of God, to hold these words, live into them a little bit. Psalm 131. O Lord, my heart is not lifted up, my eyes are not raised too high. I do not occupy myself with things too great and too marvelous for me, but I have calmed and quieted my soul like a weaned child with its mother. My soul is like the weaned child that is with me. O Israel, hope in the Lord from this time on and forevermore. O Lord, my heart is not lifted up. My eyes are not raised too high. I do not occupy myself with things too great and too marvelous for me, but I have calmed and quieted my soul. Like a weaned child with its mother, my soul is like the weaned child that is with me. O Israel, hope in the Lord from this time on and forevermore. O Lord, my heart is not lifted up. My eyes are not raised too high. I do not occupy myself with things too great and too marvelous for me. These are difficult words for us in a society that's bent on growth and achievement, bent on success. In a society that tells us we can do anything, be anyone. We don't have to live too long to know that that's just not true. And that's not a bad thing. That in finding our place, our lane, our rhythm in life with God, and not raising our eyes too high, and not occupying ourselves with things that are not for us. This is not a movement into low self-esteem. This is a movement into truth, a movement into accepting what God has given us, what God has for us. One thing I've found helpful in recent years is realizing that new things, new changes, both good and ones we might deem as bad, they come with new challenges of their own. Things that we think might be good. Places in life that we would like to find ourselves. And some of them very difficult. And so it is a great joy to not raise our eyes too high, to keep our head down, follow Jesus, to not occupy ourselves with things that are not for us. And so, God, we don't want to limit what you have for us, but we also don't want to be greedy. We also don't want to buy into some of the lies of our world. Oh Lord, my heart is not lifted up. My eyes are not raised too high. I do not occupy myself with things too great and too marvelous for me. But I have calmed and quieted my soul, like a weaned child with its mother. My soul is like the weaned child that is with me. Oh, to have a calmed and quieted soul. How desperate humans are for this. A calmed and quieted soul. This image of a weaned child. It's a striking image for me. I remember when my own kids were breastfeeding, and when they were full, when they were done, they had this look about them, a sort of bliss. We used to joke that they seemed drugged. And here the psalmist offers this image for us. Our soul is calmed and quieted, like a weaned child with its mother. My soul is like the weaned child that is with me. This image, this picture, that our union, our connection with God is life-sustaining, that's the well we go to. That as we move, our being, our living, our breathing comes from that well. And in such we find our souls are calmed and quieted. And there is a level of choice involved here. What is the well we go to for life-sustaining nutrients? There's lots of wells for us to choose from. Many of them do not calm and quiet our soul. We go to the source. We go before God. Again and again. I have calmed and quieted my soul. Like a weaned child with its mother, my soul is like the weaned child that is with me. O Israel, hope in the Lord, from this time on and forevermore. This is an invitation for us to place our hope in God. And it is a hope that does not disappoint. Hope in the Lord, starting now and forevermore. We hope in many things in life. We hope in our paychecks, our retirement accounts, hope in institutions and politics, hope in the Lord. Hope in the Lord. O Israel, hope in the Lord from this time on and forevermore. Psalm 131. O Lord, my heart is not lifted up, my eyes are not raised too high. I do not occupy myself with things too great and too marvelous for me, but I have calmed and quieted my soul, like a weaned child with its mother. My soul is like the weaned child that is with me. O Israel, hope in the Lord from this time on and forevermore.
So, like I said, that's an excerpt from Renovare Podcast. I highly recommend it if you are ever just needing like relaxing. That dude's voice is like super sleepy, so maybe don't listen to it while you're sleepy unless that's the effect you want. But he along with another podcast that he did this with called the Invitation Podcast. They do these musical kind of readings through the Psalms and through various different scriptures to help us like dive into them a little bit more. The reason this psalm was so impactful to me specifically during that period of time in my life was that I guess it had just never occurred to me that maybe there are not questions that I'm supposed to know the answers to. I do not concern myself with great matters or things too wonderful for me. That's what David says in the first verse. Unfortunately, I don't think that we have the humility to say that sometimes as Christians. We want the answers, and we want the answers now. We want God to tell us why he is doing the things he is doing, or why he is not doing the things he said he was going to do. We want to know what the direction God has for our life is. We want to know when he is going to bring the right person along that, we're going to get married to. We want to know when he is going to help us decide what our future is going to look like. We want to know why he has allowed our families to have the struggles and issues that they have had. We want him to let us know why he has let our surroundings get so unstable. And the questions go on and on. It's one of the main things I remember from Bible college whenever I spent my time in Bible college, is that half the time we were just sitting in the dorms trying to answer all of these questions that we've had. And I do think that God is kind and merciful and often gives us answers to those questions. But I don't think we spend enough time thinking about the fact that sometimes the answer is be humble, sit down. As the prophet Kendrick Lamar says. That song had come out right after I had listened to this psalm, and I remember the rest of the song, super vulgar. Don't go listen to it. I'm not recommending it in church, but the chorus says, be humble, sit down. Be humble, sit down. And that was the thing that I feel like sometimes is the answer that God gives us. You know, this is not something for you to know. Don't worry about it. Chill out. Sit down. And that alone can sound kind of mean and kind of like, geez, like that doesn't seem very comforting. But that's why I love this second part of the psalm where he says, I have calmed and quieted myself. I am like a weaned child with its mother. Like a weaned child, I am content. Obviously, this is the verse that started to mean a whole lot more to me after we had Toby. Toby's chugging his bottle right now. And like Nathan Foster said on the podcast, if you've ever watched a kid after they get done breastfeeding or drinking a bottle, it's kind of funny. They're like passed out. He said they look drugged almost. My sister-in-law Amanda calls it milk drunk. She says they look milk drunk. You know, they're just like passed out. But that really is an interesting image of just like the place God wants us to be in. It's not that he wants us to quit asking questions, go sit down, go get out of my way, quit bothering me. He wants us to relax. He wants us to chill. He wants us to be content in him. This verse is especially interesting because it is one of the very few times where more motherly, maternal, and almost maybe feminine attributes are attributed to God, rather than, God is our Father, and the sort of masculine things that it usually talks about. There's a couple of famous verses. Noah was actually referencing one just a second ago in the sound room. He was talking about Jesus when he sees the people of Jerusalem and he sees how unfaithful they are, and he's like distraught and depressed, and he says that he wishes he could be like a mother hen who could gather these people under his wings. But I think that there's a real strength to the imagery that David chose here because of that, because just imagining the comfort that a weaned child feels in the arms of a loving mother. That's the state of mind that God wants us to be in. And so the very last verse says, Israel, put your hope in the Lord, both now and forevermore. I think this is where it applies to what Jacob was talking about last week and sharing with us. The temptation when we have questions and when we have doubts and when we have things that are bothering us, the temptation is to start questioning God and to start thinking maybe God doesn't know what he is doing. And one of the best things we can do by being content is learning to just chill out, trust that he has got it handled. So I want us to reread this verse together. You guys have heard me say before, I'm a big proponent of saying things out loud. I think saying it with your mouth just gives it a whole nother level of meaning. So hopefully now that we've meditated on the verse a little bit, I want us to say this verse out loud together, but to say it like a prayer. And try to mean the words as much as you can. So, just read along with me here. My heart is not proud, Lord. My eyes are not haughty. I do not concern myself with great matters or things too wonderful for me. but I have calmed and quieted myself. I'm like a weaned child with its mother. Like a weaned child, I am content. Israel, put your hope in the Lord, both now and forevermore.